All rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilman Alvarez.
Present.
Councilman Cypress.
Here.
Councilman Larka.
Here.
Councilman O'Connor.
Here.
Supervisor Hay.
Here. Notation to the exits in the front and the rear. An electronic device, please put it on vibrate. I make a motion to come out of the executive session. No action was taken.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
First item on the agenda this evening is a presentation, discussion, Hudson Valley Energy, CCA, which is Community Choice Aggregation, and Jeff Domansky.
Yes. May I approach and-
Yes, sir. And that mic is hot, so you can go there. Thank you.
So thank you so much. My name is Jeff Domansky. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit based here in the Hudson Valley. Our program is Hudson Valley Energy. And we're involved in a number of, with 16 communities currently actively involved in a program called, by the state, Community Choice Aggregation. And I won't use too many acronyms, but it's commonly called CCA. And just if you can go to the next slide there. Oops, actually, if you go towards the end, I pulled a bait and switch in the presentation. If you go down to the image of the knife, the Swiss Army knife. Thank you so much. I'm going to start there. Thank you. Community choice aggregation was enabled by the state in 2016. And it's enabled by a municipality, a city or town or village, by passing a local law. And I use this analogy. In essence, it gives a city or town or village the ability to use any one of the tools that are in this Swiss Army knife analogy. The two tools on the left are electricity supply buying club and solar decisions, community solar decisions. In essence, these are two elements in the energy marketplace that any utility customer has available to them to make as an individual customer in New York State. But underneath this program that was enabled in the state in 2016, towns and cities and villages have the ability to act on behalf of their community members, changing the existing state default around the decision around electricity supply from the utility making that choice for the customers, which is the state default setting, to a locally decided default. And if you can go back to the second slide, please. In essence, what happens, the way this works, is communities aggregate together to have leverage in the energy supply marketplace, acting on behalf of their community members. To use another analogy, like a Costco or a BJ's Wholesale, the power of numbers gives the ability for the town or city or village to give a very good arrangement, a very good deal to their community members. This slide describes in one sentence what this policy is. So community choice aggregation, in a word, it's a policy, again, enabled by a local law, that gives cities and towns and villages the ability to make that offering of a default setting for electricity supply or community solar on behalf of all of the residents in their community who are currently in the existing default setting. And the existing default setting by state mandate is that if they don't make a decision for one of these opportunities in the private marketplace, the utility company will make the supply decision for them. So again, this gives a city or town or village the ability to change the default in partnership, typically, with other communities, using the power of numbers for good leverage. The bottom of the slide shows that it was enabled in 2016. The two middle boxes are the reasonings why this happened. You know, why should a community consider acting on behalf of its citizens to offer, on an opt-out basis, a new choice for electricity supply? The box on the left is the state decisions. There's a win-win-win scenario that's available through this. It does create the potential for cost savings for community members, for electricity supply. And it supports, for us, this is the reason we're in this, that you can have a win-win scenario. Citizens could actually pay less for 100% renewable production than they would otherwise have paid for predominantly non-renewable production when the utility is making that decision. And the third, by acting on behalf of their community members, there are numerous elements of consumer protection that are available to them. We've been involved in these programs with these communities since 2019. And in that time, we've had literally thousands of conversations, myself and my team at my nonprofit, responding to the launch of these programs and community members contacting us. And what I've learned in those conversations is that in the electricity supply marketplace, where there are dozens and dozens of companies that have been acting in the state for over 20 years, many people have been happy with decisions they've made. But what I've discovered in those conversations is that if somebody does not know somebody who's had a very bad experience in that marketplace, then they've likely had one themselves. It's been so prolific that these companies out there offering private contracts for electricity supply have situations that are very unfavorable often for community members.
And are those the ESCOs?
Those are ESCOs, yes, and I use that acronym coming up, that energy supply companies, or ESCOs. In essence, this program allows a city and town or village to engage an ESCO, but to, in essence, handcuff them into the program requirements and thereby protect their community members while still offering those very favorable rates. So that, in a nutshell, is why the state is promoting it. The box on the right is just to answer the question again about communities ask, why should we get involved in this? Why should we act on behalf of our community members if they can go into the private marketplace and obtain an electricity supply contract, or they can engage on a subscription for community solar? It is not rocket science out there, but there is a lot of decision making, and there, as I mentioned, a lot of bad actors. The beauty of this program is that communities acting on behalf in a leadership role basically can protect their citizens from those bad actors and optimize the offer that's out there. And I have a slide coming up that actually shows the quantification, the degree to which these benefits are actually obtained. Next slide, please. So this is where community choice aggregation laws have been passed. All those blue dots on the New York State map, it represents more than 150 communities, cities and towns and villages in New York State have passed local laws. About, I think, approaching 70 communities are actively in a community choice aggregation program for electricity supply. And in the lower right, there's two circles, and I have the names of the programs next to them. The Hudson Valley Community Power Program is 10 communities in central Hudson territory, and the Rockland Community Power is 6 communities that are in Orange and Rockland utility territory. And those are the programs that my nonprofit is part of, supporting. And I'll show you how the performance of those programs on an upcoming slide. So that's where it is. The next slide, please. So where is CCA but on a customer's bill? And I have a very small image, and I do zoom in, but this is a NYSEG electricity bill. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there are actually several bills in one on that one page of the bill. So if you please click again. So I just zoomed in on the top portion of the bill. And if you click again, the top section in the red box with the labeling to the right shows that these are the line items for delivery charges. Since deregulation went into effect in New York State, when the monopoly was broken up on utility service, utilities are not allowed to own generation sources in New York State. They're not allowed to make money on supply. The delivery is the only section that utilities are allowed to make money on. In essence, utility companies, because of deregulation, are like FedEx or UPS or the Postal Service. They don't make the packages that the customers receive, but they make sure that the customers get them reliably. That's what NYSEG does. That's what Central Hudson does. So all of the charges that they make money on are in the red box. If you click again, below the delivery section in the green box is the supply charges section. So when a customer is paying their normal electricity bill, how the electricity is made, where it's made, and how much it costs is inside the green box. The red box is red, like stop. Nothing changes if a CCA program launches in a community. What does change are the line items in the supply section box. So a CCA program for electricity supply only affects the supply portion of the bill, and it all happens on the bill. If a community launches, there are 3 line items in that section. If a program launches, one single fixed rate for an extended period, typically 2 to 3 years, is one line item in that section, and everything's included in that one section. That's the simple way that the program works for supply. If you click again, a lot of people get confused between electricity supply and a lot of talk about what's happening with solar, either on their home or business, or these fields of solars to which they can subscribe called community solar. I put this up here, one, to show that it is a separate decision. A solar decision, whether it's a solar system on your home or business, or you subscribe to something called community solar, it lives in a different place on the bill. If you click one more time. I put it in a purple box that this is where solar crediting exists. And this is showing for a community solar subscription. It's a separate part of the bill. It is different than the supply portion. Both of these can be optimized through a community choice aggregation program. Most communities are just dealing with the green section of the box currently, but there is this wonderful ability to actually optimize both for customers. But again, just to emphasize, one, this does not displace the role of NYSEG in the community relationship. It's just a change in the supply section of the bill for the supply portion of the program, but there is ability to also affect solar, which is different than supply. Next slide, please.
Jeff, I have a quick question
Yeah,
on
please.
this slide. What if I have my electric bill here and I have like on-peak, off-peak, mid-peak. Would this apply, do those rates change for people that have on-peak or off-peak as well?
For time of use, it depends. I'm not sure where it applies for NYSEG, but for example, in Central Hudson Territory, you can do a time of use program where you get charged different rates for the time of day based on whether it's a high demand portion of the day or low. If it's a time of use program that affects the delivery section, you can do that program, this program, a CCA program, and be unaffected. Some utilities have time of use charge differentiation in the supply section, and you would be automatically opted out of the program. You could join and switch out of your time of use arrangement, but there's a number of conditions where somebody is not automatically included, and that's one of them.
So to reiterate that, if your on-peak or time of use is only in supply, we could.
Only in delivery. If it's only in delivery, which is the part that's unaffected, then you could do the program.
Oh, okay, gotcha, okay.
Historically, Eric, I think NYSEG only did on and off peak when you had electric heat, so I don't know that it's all that
I
widespread.
think I need to talk to NYSEG because I don't have electric.
Different utilities do it different ways too, and that's part of the benefit of working with an administrator in these programs is just simply navigating and making it very turnkey and no cost for the community to explore this.
How did these programs work with the latest spike that everyone noticed around?
Magnificently, really, that's what we show on the upcoming graph slide, so we can show you. And I'll get there towards the, oh yes, a question?
Before we get to the
Yeah.
pricing slide, so, in the beginning you talked about how, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how most people are unhappy with their ESCO.
Many, yes.
And Joule is kind of the same thing, so, like, why should we be comfortable, using a service that potentially our residents are not happy with? You said we could hold their feet to the fire or something, but, like personally, I don't want to manage an electric company, so like, how does that work?
Well, it's in the structure of the program by the regulatory design by the Public Service Commission. It requires a very simple, very transparent arrangement that a supplier, if he bids to be the supplier for the program as an ESCO, and they're being watchdogged by the administrator and the partnership of communities and my organization with them, it's very, very simple what's offered. Before you go out and accept that there will be a bid offering requested, what your line in the sand is. And you're looking for a fixed rate that cannot vary. And you're looking for a no contract arrangement so that your community members are given this as a new default, but this is what shows here, none of their other choices are taken away. So it becomes a new default, very simple, fixed rate, no contract. But if they don't want it, they can opt out at any time with no fee and take advantage of the existing two choices that they do have.
So are most people unhappy with ESCOs because of price fluctuation?
That, hidden fees, and targeting of vulnerable populations, there's a number of things that they've done that have been very unfavorable and created well-earned distrust.
Service-related would still be NYSEG.
I'm sorry, say again?
Anything service-related would still be
Billing, storm repair, all of the delivery aspects are all still NYSEG, yes. And so this is just kind of a reiteration of the choices that are in existence before a CCA program, and then if a program launches, the third choices. This is my menu analogy, like the appetizer menu in a restaurant, where you can only have one choice from the options. So for electricity supply, and this is redundant, forgive me for reiterating, but trying to be clear, there's three choices if a community launches a CCA program. There's two choices, the top two, before a CCA program launches. The first choice for electricity supply is that the utility company, by state mandate, by Albany mandate, is the default choice. They'll make a decision on where the supply comes from. They predominantly choose non-renewable sourcing. It varies every month. Nobody has input into the choices they make. It's basically take it or leave it with the utility company. Anybody can, since the late 1990s, go out and engage in a private contract with an ESCO, a third-party supplier. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of them. I put up there Green Mountain Energy, Ambit, just two examples of what I'm talking about, ESCOs. So that is an option that somebody could opt out of the original default and choose a third-party option. If a CCA program launches, it becomes a third choice. Engaging an ESCO in a restricted arrangement set up by the administrator and the partnership of communities, and it becomes, by the double asterisk, the new default choice. It is the default choice offered and including anyone who's in the original situation, number one. Anyone who's in a private third-party contract already is unaffected. They stay in their third-party contract. Everyone in number one is transferred to number two, to number three, but they can also opt out if they want to at any time and still take advantage of one or two. So these are the options. And
So if
just
they
how it
do
works.
nothing, they'll get moved to 3.
Correct.
But they'll have some notification.
Yes.
If they want to go back to the default, they can.
And quite a bit of notification of that, too, yes.
What do you usually see as a participation rate in this program?
It's typically about 80 to roughly 80% of a community that is in that choice one set. So 80% are offered the option, and there's roughly a 10 to 15% opt-out rate when the program launches. And then depending on how the rates are doing compared to the utility rates, like we're having a significant uptick in people who opted out opting back into the program. But it's roughly about a 10 to 15% opt-out of the eligible group.
And is this just for residential?
Small business as well. Anything with smaller than a demand meter is typically included.
What about, there's a school board member here, what about the school district?
They can join, it depends, they probably have multiple meters. Some of them would probably automatically be included. They'd be in the right service class to be automatically included. They probably have larger ones that would not automatically be included, but anybody could join and take advantage of it if they wanted to.
Does the more people that join affect the rates?
It does not. No, the supplier goes in knowing roughly what the demand pool is and what the opt-out rates are, and they're just locked in. So even if everybody opted out except one customer, they still have to supply that fixed rate for the full duration of the contract for that one customer.
How long's the contract?
We've done 2 years so far. The first year of the first program for the Central Hudson was 2 years. The Rockland group was in a 2-year contract, but we just started a 3-year contract in the middle of last year after the 2-year contract ended in Central Hudson. So now it's a 3-year contract.
Is there an opt-out easy enough to get out if you had to?
For the individual customers, it's super easy, and that's what my nonprofit does. Phone call, it's anything. We just have to transfer their information, and it's just they're out of the program.
You meant if the town wanted out for some reason, is that what you meant?
Well, no, even individuals as well. Anyone that opts in could opt out. In other words,
And opt back
say
in.
with the latest spike, they were part of the program, and that spike happened, they could just say, hey, enough of this.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. They can get out, or it's really, to use another analogy, it's like the pool, a public swimming pool, and you give them a membership for no cost. They can get out or get in whenever they want, and that's what my nonprofit helps them do.
You may have said this, for the contract, are the supply rates locked?
Yes.
Or would we be disadvantaged to get in at this point since things are peaking?
It's actually looking quite good. I mean, there's an understanding in sort of the market projections that this is an anomaly that we've seen, and you'll see the anomaly on the graph. But the projections are that we're living back in normal times. And for a number of times, there's an anticipation of roughly a 2% escalation in utility rates, year on year. And so it is looking very promising still. It's really good time, actually, to fix rates in the projected future.
If we do this, you or your organization, stays in partnership with us?
Absolutely,
throughout this?
yeah, stays for the duration. And I'm in partnership with one of the 4 approved administrators in the state, and I would encourage you to talk to the other 2 that are potentials for, you'd want to do your diligence to determine which administrator you would want to work with. Next slide, please. So I'm expanding on my menu analogy, and this is, again, to just reiterate, there's 3 choices. You can pick one or any of the one, but you can only pick one from the supply menu on the left. Similarly, there's 3 choices for solar, and this is to draw the distinction between electricity supply and solar decisions, including community solar, which is commonly confused. But you can mix and match, just like in a restaurant. You can pick any entree, any appetizer. The same rule applies for these two tables. You can mix and match any of these supply choices with any of the solar choices. Where the solar choices are, A, you don't have to do anything about solar, just do nothing. B is installing a system on your home or business. Or you can't do B and C. If you haven't done B and you want to do something about solar, for the last about half of a decade, the state has allowed community solar. And that's where you can become, in essence, by subscribing, often with no cost, a virtual owner of a field of solar that's in the utility territory, which has guaranteed reductions on your utility bill. It's another version of a symbiotic relationship. But again, they mix and match in any way. And that's just emphasizing, again, the differences between solar and the choices that anyone has. Next slide, please.
Is there much of a dollar value difference between solar and electric?
I'm sorry, say again, please.
Pardon?
What was your question?
Is there much of a difference between solar and electric as far as pricing?
Well, the solar arrangements that we talk about tend to just be monetary benefits. The supply choices are rates. So a supply, you look at your supply section of your bill, you're dealing with some amount of kilowatt hours that you consumed in a month, which gets multiplied by a rate, some dollars per kilowatt hour, which is typically in cents. Like roughly, on average, before the spike, it's roughly 8 cents per kilowatt hour. Our program is 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour in Central Hudson Territory. So that's the supply rate. In solar, it's not a rate. It's really about how much a system generates and how much of a credit that results in on your bill. Like if you show, thank you for going back to this, perfect. If you look on the bottom section in the purple, the community solar credit is a minus, tens of dollars on the bill. And it's based on historic usage.
So is the solar always a credit?
It is always a credit, unless the system shuts down for some reason and is covered in snow. But it is always a credit. It's never a cost. It's always a credit.
So we're going to propose to have a plant within a year's time here in the town of Southeast. So if we identify the kilowatts and everything at the time, would you be able to give us which is the better?
If you launched the program, you'd know what the kilowatt hour rate would be, yes. But before you launched it, and I'll show you the steps.
Okay.
Before you launch, you'd know before you actually issued an RFP, before you committed. And there's a number of non-commitment steps for the exploration.
Okay.
So this is the performance. I have two very, a little hard to look at from the back, I apologize. But this is the performance of the Rockland Community Power Program. It's the 6 communities that are bulleted on the left: Orangetown, Clarkstown, the village of Haverstraw, and Nyack, South Nyack, and Upper Nyack. It started in November 2020. There's a lot of lines on there. The red line, the straight red line across the top, is my calculation at the time of what a private individual customer could find for a comparable 100% fixed rate product from the private marketplace. And at the time, it was up around 9 cents.
That's an ESCO.
That's an ESCO, and that's an average of the ESCOs that I found out there. There's a straight green line towards the bottom. That is our program rate for the Rockland Community Power Partnership Program, and it's about 7.3 cents, and that is a 2-year contract. So from November of 2020 through October of 2022, that is the rate that every participating member of those 6 communities will pay for the supply section of their bill, multiplied by their usage. We also offered, just for those who are more cost conscious, another fixed rate, and that's the purple line at the bottom. And that was below 7 cents. It's about 6.5 cents. That is not the default choice. It's an optional choice that someone who stays in the program could choose. So the bouncy line that looks like the roller coaster, the yellow line, that is Orange and Rockland's rate month to month. And you can see it fluctuates quite a bit. In the beginning, it was down at our standard rate price, then it jumped up in the second month above. The blue line, which is a little bumpy but climbs up, the blue line is a running average, and that's the one to really look at and compare to the flat lines at the bottom in particular. And you can see that that is the running average of the utility rate, and simply put, it climbs about, by April of 2021, above both of our program rates. And since, even before the crazy spikes of early this year, it was already, our program was already doing much better than the utility rates. And that's, again, an apples to oranges comparison, because that yellow line is predominantly non-renewable. Our flat green line is 100% renewable from New York State sources. So it's the win-win is bearing out. It's a similar story, a little harder to look at because of the crazy number on the next slide for the 10 communities that are in Central Hudson Territory. The chart got harder to read on the left because of the crazy spike in February of 2022, when it went up to 22 cents per kilowatt hour in Central Hudson Territory. It went from 11 cents in January up to 22 cents in February and down to 12 cents in March. But in essence, the blue line, that running average, the same color coding, is above our program rates and pretty much went there very quickly and is staying above there. Even before the crazy price spikes, it is working out in normal times, and it is looking to be very favorable going forward. The wording on the chart near that bump is saying that the estimation we did for just January and February alone is that the participants collectively saved $3.5 million, or about $150 per household alone in February by being in the program versus paying the utility rate. So this is a particularly good time, but even before the craziness, it was working well in terms of the win-win-win scenario.
Can you go back to the last one?
Yep.
So for 4-5 months or so, your rate was actually higher
Yes.
than the standard rate.
Yep, and that can be the
So what
case.
made the community want to do it and trust that it was going to work out eventually in their favor?
The market knowledge that's brought to bear by the administrator, looking forward, knowing that the expectation that it would, this was a good time to fix, and what the projections were for the 12 to 24, 36-month period ahead, and it's borne out. Odd things can happen. In the first 2 years of our Central Hudson contract, when the pandemic hit and the economy tanked, we had a number of months that were lower than our program rate, and that was an unexpected occurrence. So it can happen, and folks did opt out during that time. But I believe we're coming into a time and more of a recognition that fossil fuels are becoming more expensive, and this idea and the ability of a program operating just basically in the marketplace, but the ability to hedge, to forward fix the rate is favorable and does work out for the community members very well. And then the last slide, if you go to it, is just a process slide. And these are the 13 steps to launch a program. It starts with passing a local law, which is truly almost a no-brainer step, because what's shown in the box there, the first 6 steps, I put them in a box to emphasize that there's no commitment or requirement to actually launch a program by doing any of those steps. So passing a local law, even selecting an administrator to work with, doing public outreach and awareness building through even the required by state outreach, a minimum of 60 days of outreach and awareness building, getting the data pull from the utility, and starting to design the request for proposals, understanding what the benchmarks are and what the market looks like. All of that can be done before ever deciding that you might even consider launching the program. If everything looks favorable and you have the communication with the administration and the other communities you're working with in the design of the request for proposals, and you issue the request for proposals, and a bid comes back that's compliant, that works and makes everyone happy, that's when you step out of the box. You accept a compliant proposal, and then you move towards the rest of the step towards a live and active program. It's typically represented here as typically a 10 to 12-month process. And the box on the lower right just emphasizes that engaging administrator comes at no cost. In the design of the process, everything is done at risk by the administration team on the hope and anticipation that a program will launch. The administrator gets paid by a fee within the bid provided supply rate. So the suppliers have to include an 8/100th of a cent rate within that and still have a compliant bid. So there's no cost except for opportunity cost to review the agreements and the like, but there's no cost to the town or the community members. It is simply just that fixed rate program, which could be done for community solar as well, but that's a little bit down the line.
So this would take 12 months to put into effect if we started now?
Typically,
Okay.
just realistically. I mean, you can really accelerate if you want, probably get it done in 6 to 8 months, but the typical process is about 10 to 12 months.
And what would be the rate if, I don't know if you can answer this, but right now, what would be a rate that would be offered?
Well, I mean, I can tell you what the program rates are right now. For the Rockland program, it's about 7.3 cents. For 100% renewable, for Central Hudson, it's 6.5 cents. I don't know. We're about to go to bid for 4 communities in about 2 months.
Have you done any since this spike?
The one we're about to do right now, and I could report back on what the I mean, we're very optimistic about the returns on that, on the future projections, and so I could tell you what the impact and how we're looking at these. The spike should not impact significantly the rate that's shown, because that would be a deal killer in essence. But we'll know as we get, within probably about a month and a half time, we'll have some sense of what the market looks like.
So I have my bill here, and my on-peak is 14 cents, and my off-peak is 10 cents. So it sounds like it could be promising.
Yeah, I do believe it's going to be quite good, probably in the single digits.
And if our town participated, Hudson Valley and Rockland would be put into one of those groups?
No, it would probably be, the way it's progressing, it'd probably be individually branded. We did this as an aggregation partnership name,
Okay.
but the going forward, because we're adding so many communities at different timelines, the way we're getting approval from the Department of Public Service is to just brand it as, this would be Southeast's CCA program, and that's the way we would describe it. You'd be looped in with other communities, and you guys would have a shared rate, the same rate, but you'd have your own name.
Would there be benefits in getting a better bid if this was, let's say, a county CCA?
Well, counties can't do it. It has to be the enabling authority, the taxing authority.
So to Eric's point, what if we partnered with other towns? Is there any benefit to that?
There is, and that's what the administrator does. It's no burden on you to try to gather other towns. You select an administrator who you feel does a good job at gathering the aggregation for sufficient numbers together.
Okay.
So it is very, not only is there no cost, it's structured as in essence, a turnkey program for the municipalities.
Okay.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to answer more questions, but my contact is on the last slide if you'd like, after the knife. But I'm happy to answer more questions, and I'm happy to come back, and it's a lot here, and so revisiting it is often very helpful.
Well, I'm quite sure we will do that. We have something to chew on. We'll discuss it amongst ourselves.
Thank you
and,
so much.
See where round 2 may go.
All right, thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Okay, next item on the agenda will be public hearing, special permit, landscape concepts, 50 to 58 Sodom Road. Do you have your cards and everything?
What's that? Oh, we have to open the public
Yeah.
hearing.
Well, I'm going to make a motion to open a public hearing and waive the mailings.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You're on.
I have a board here if we need to, but yeah, I don't have an easel.
There we go.
Yeah,
Want me to hold?
Very good. Good evening. My name is Peter Scott. I'm representing the GML Associates Landscape Concepts for a project located at 50 to 58 Sodom Road. The project is a pre-existing mixed commercial site of about 0.9 acres, and basically it contains 3 buildings. It was in quite a bit of disarray when my client purchased it, and they've been endeavoring to clean up the site itself. But to the southern portion, there's a warehouse building about 4,800 square feet, 2 stories. In the middle, there's an office building of about 1,200 square feet. And on the northern portion of the property, there's a 2-story residential unit apartment of about 1,400 square feet. The site predates most of the zoning, so the buildings are all located within the front yard or side yard setbacks. It contained numerous access ways from Sodom Road, including parking, which is both on the property and also within the right-of-way of Sodom Road. The intent of this project was to clean up the site and make it as conforming as possible. And in doing so, we did many steps of the project itself. The project is the proposed tenant, Landscape Concepts, it's a landscape design and construction company, and they basically predominantly complete residential, commercial projects, including wetland and pond remediation projects. They did the farm-to-market plantings, which is a subdivision in the town of Southeast. It's one of their products, and their landscaping was completed in the last year. The site, because of the layout of the buildings, most of the work is in the rear of the property to the west. And encircling it would be the existing buildings themselves. Their vehicles will be parked behind the buildings itself. There's also an outside storage area, which is behind the buildings to the north corner of the property. And all that is being cleaned up from some of a haphazard site in the past. This is a neighborhood business project, and basically neighborhood business allows a special permit for a general business use, and that is the category in which this proposed project falls. So it's a win-win for the town by having them take over the project and be granted a special permit. Beyond the cleaning of the site and the remodeling of the buildings, they're putting landscaping along Sodom Road. In a discussion with the superintendent of highways, they are limiting the parking in the front of the property, prohibiting trucks which used to park there in the past. The outdoor storage area will be encompassed with a landscape buffering project, of which Landscape Concepts is designing. They're adding some lighting, which is going to meet the night sky criteria, and they're eliminating all the existing lights which didn't meet night sky criteria, and replacing them throughout the entire concept. So with the completion of the project, the property will be compliant to the maximum extent possible with all the local regulations of the town, and it'll be an improvement along Sodom Road.
I had one question. Can you say again how many residential units it is?
It's a residential building with 2 units in, I believe.
Yeah, so I just looked at the property in our system. It looks like it's a single family, and the real estate listing says it's a single family as well.
Okay, I'm just listing what we are aware of.
Okay.
I can verify that.
Yeah, that would have to be resolved.
Okay, fine.
And just for those of you, 50 to 58 Sodom Road, the blinking light by Carvel goes straight ahead up what used to be Old Route 22. It's a stop sign, make a left. It's a second building and a group of buildings. And for your real old timers, it's right across from the old Hunt Club. And did you say there going to be no parking in front of the building, the actual building?
No, what they did, the arrangement that was established by the superintendent of highways and the town engineer is they're going to limit any, no truck parking is permitted in the front of the building, but the parking spots will be for visitors only to the facility. The employees will park on the site itself.
Now, when you say no truck parking, is there a limitation to the size of a truck?
Well, when I say no truck parking, I'm referencing the parking spaces along the frontage of
Yes,
Sodom
I
Road.
know that, but I'm saying.
There'll be no trucks are allowed to
I
be
think one
parked
of our
there.
board members has a truck. It's a truck, but it's not a big truck. I mean,
We have other parking spaces that are available on the property for trucks.
Okay.
And so the agreement we reached is it would be pedestrian cars only, no trucks.
and that used to be owned by NNS, that building, right?
Pardon me?
Is that NNS old building?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Public comment? Anyone for public comment? Seeing none, make a motion to close the public hearing and allow a 10-day comment period and be on the next agenda.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, make a motion to go into the second portion, the noise ordinance.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ashley, would you like to waive the reading of the public notice? We've pretty much had this numerous people make comment, so I guess we'll just have the people come up, make comment, and respond accordingly.
Okay.
Okay, public comment.
Sure, come on up.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Michael O'Keefe. I live at 4 Pine Tree Lane. Now, I'm a little, I got this information late from my wife about this, the noise ordinance. Is this to increase the noise ordinance, or is it to lower the number?
It's to make it a more restrictive noise ordinance, so there've been complaints within the town about certain types of noise at certain hours of the day, so it's to improve enforcement of the noise.
Okay, because for me personally, like I've contacted, I filed like a noise complaint, and I wanted to know what, with this new ordinance, would it be easier to get the noise recorded? Because, for instance, I'll just use the example that I'm dealing with. On Sundays, the church on 312, that's an open area church, the audio is so loud that I can hear it in my house on Pine Tree with my window shut at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we can hear the entire sermon. And then on Friday nights, well past dark, you can again hear things. So my wife had contacted the church. We had emailed them, phone called them. We filed a noise complaint. We talked to the county department, the police department. They told us that we would have to obviously get some sort of a reading. After making the noise complaint, they did lower the noise for about a month, and then went back up to normal. We filed another complaint, but then the winter came, and obviously they're not doing anything about that. So, I apologize that I'm not more prepared, but I just got out of work, and my wife was telling me about this. So this is just to get more of a restriction towards the noise ordinance?
That's correct. So there's two main updates to the noise code. So there is a noise code right now that regulates level of noise at the property line with a regular decibel meter. One of the complaints that we've heard from the community is bass noise, and that's something that wasn't regulated in the existing noise code. So this new noise code would regulate bass noise, which is at a lower frequency, and would allow enforcement of that. The other thing it does is it helps to better enforce noise that's created after hours. Right now, the noise code relies on a decibel meter, which is fine when it's during normal business hours and the code enforcement officer is available to go out and check. But if it's after hours, the Putnam County Sheriff's Department would be the one responding, and they don't have a noise meter. So what it does is it adds a provision in the code regarding unreasonable noise, so that if there was an active noise violation occurring, the Putnam County Sheriff's Department could stop that noise. If it became a recurring problem, that complaint could be made to the town, and we could schedule the code enforcement officer to go out and witness that noise with the noise meter on another date.
Okay, appreciate it, thank you.
Now, before you leave, can you just give me your name and phone number?
Absolutely.
Because this is the first we're hearing about that particular location.
When I give my noise complaint?
Well, no, I mean, I did not,
first
we
board.
don't see everything, but now that I'm aware of it,
There are similar complaints in town for other locations.
and I'll check into it, and I'll give you a call and tell you how.
No, Willis isn't here tonight, and Ashley, I don't want to put you on the spot, but
Okay,
are
thank you.
religious organizations kind of not included in this?
Religious organizations do have some protections under the law, but I'm not sure that it would include like violating a noise code, as long as they're able to practice their religion.
Okay, public comment.
I'm back. Joe Rashapo at 67 Allview. I have been blessed with a neighbor across the street who enjoys their music next to their pool, which is about 60 feet, maybe 100 feet from my front door. And they play their music continuously. Had calls from the sheriff's department, your enforcement agent has come over, and they've completely disregarded their neighborhood. And they've been doing it for the past 4 years. So,
That's part of the reason we're doing this.
right, exactly, and I do appreciate that.
I think one of the things that we discovered when looking into this is that giving, other towns have set this up so that the police can help with the enforcement, and that's one of the goals of this. So I don't think the way our code was before, they could.
Right. But, you know, these people have got a, an act. So when I had called in the sheriff's department before, and they were, you know, compliant. But then as soon as they leave, half hour later, the noise level goes up again. So I'm wondering, is there some sort of permanent or regulating noise instrument that could be based on or near their property to measure for a period of time, say a week, a day?
I mean, there is noise monitoring that can occur. I'm not sure if that's something that the town would be able to do.
Right. Because every time the officials come in, sure, they turn down the music. As soon as they leave, you know, okay, enough time has passed, up goes the volume. And I'm not alone at this, so, you know, they're the only people that play music, and it's loud, so.
Is it like every weekend? I mean, we've
Yeah,
heard about it.
it's continuous.
You know, we've heard about it from numerous people on the
Yeah.
road.
You know, the windows vibrate. I haven't opened up my windows or front door in the past 4 years.
But is it weekends, every day of the week,
You know what?
evenings?
I will call it weekends for now.
I think what we could do, Joe, is, you know, one, this new law will, if it gets passed, will hopefully help,
Yeah.
and I guess we would notify the sheriff's department that we've passed this, and
Yeah.
hopefully that can help.
Yeah.
But two is, if it's reoccurring, we have hired a code enforcer that
Right.
we could help, or schedule to go out on the weekend or something, but
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Yeah, that's been done before. That's all been done before. The code enforcer
The
has
other
come
big factor
over.
with this one is the base noise. The
Yeah.
code enforcement officer had gone out with the town's existing noise measurement equipment, and it wasn't registering because it wasn't at the right frequency, but it was enough that it was causing vibrations in people's homes.
Right.
So the new code would capture that lower frequency, and the code enforcement officer would be able to write violations.
All right.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
forgot. Yeah, so it's not just the decibels anymore.
Right, okay. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
John, ma'am?
Good evening. My name is Tim Wallach. I've lived all of my 72 years in Brewster since I was 2 days old. Why do we live in the country? Why do we live in Southeast instead of a city? Sunshine, fresh air, and peace and quiet. Isn't that what we all enjoy and cherish? Our local government can't control everything, such as air pollution or how we should respond to the Ukrainian crisis. But what you can control is local noise. And this is where local government can so effectively protect the overwhelming majority of our community from the depredations of selfish neighbors and businesses. This is in your power, and I am so glad you are exercising it. We should be open to adjustments in the future as needed to achieve these laudable objectives. One thing I noticed, I want to bring up with you, which wasn't mentioned at all in the regulations. Do we need some sort of online bulletin notice of the issuance of special permits? Otherwise, how will neighbors know that a permit has been granted for a specific day? Furthermore, how will the sheriff's office know how to respond to a noise complaint and not waste their time by responding to a special permit exception? That's my one suggestion. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
I think that's a good suggestion.
And 4 copies here, if you want to have them.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bailey Santucci. I'm here today handing out this paperwork. Below is my petition to oppose the new verbiage being added to the existing noise ordinance in the town of Southeast. My request to the town is to eliminate the verbiage unreasonable and to make an exemption for farm animals like other surrounding town codes read. In my foil, I found a conversation with Ashley and another individual where her response to the wording of unreasonable was, the reason for the addition of this section was to improve enforcement after hours. The unreasonable noise definition and provisions is very similar to what is being used in nearby communities and allows the Putnam County Sheriff's enforce the code when the town enforcement officer is closed. After doing some research, I found that the Somers Town Code does not have wording of unreasonable, but has noise generated from farming as an exception. Patterson Town Code does not have wording of unreasonable, but has the sound created in farming as an exception. And then the Carmel Town Code does not have wording of unreasonable. When I asked the question what prompted the proposed changes, Tony Hayes' response was, the changes are the result of multiple noise complaints from the town residents in several different departments, or several different parts of the town. Complaints include residential properties that frequently launch fireworks and explosives, have excessively loud pets and or play loud music, in particular bass, and certain commercial properties that play loud music. So why in my foil for the last 5 years do I see nothing in regards to complaints for fireworks and excessively loud pets, and only 3 complaints, 2 of which were unfounded? So the code is being changed based off of 3 complaints, which obviously is different. Currently in our existing town code for noise, a neighbor can play music or have a family gathering, enjoy their farm animals, or even have a sports car. All things that should be perfectly acceptable. According to the new revisions of the town code, it doesn't matter if you make noise at any level. If your neighbor feels the noise you're making is unreasonable, you're subject to a violation. The new revisions to the code are subjective, excessively broad, and unconstitutional. You can apply for a special permit for an event, but it's solely based at the discretion of the building inspector, with 0 conditions in place to hold the application process to a fair standard across the board for everyone. So does your wind chime sound peaceful and relaxing to you? It might not to your neighbor. Or do you like the purr of your sports car engine? Your neighbor may not. Or do you enjoy the sound of your horse's neighing? What one person finds reasonable, another may not. To say unreasonable leaves a broad spectrum. Over the last few weeks, I filed a FOIL for all formal complaints made in the last 5 years in regards to the noise. I was given 3 documents. A small business starting trucks between 4 and 5 a.m. in a residential zone and violating other town codes as well. Mr. Levine was able to issue a violation and they had to appear in court. A landscaping company that started work as early as 7:30 with no violation issued based off of wording of the town code with exemptions, but that's one of the things that's being changed with the new wording. Lastly, there was neighbor A, who complained about music being played at neighbor B's house. Mr. Levine went out with the noise decibel reader and determined neighbor B's music doesn't exceed the 65 dBA. Now, neighbor A was not happy with the response and stated, I quote, "The true measure for the noise invading my spiritual meditation oasis would be the noise regulating machine thingamabob that should be placed on my neighbor's property line to achieve an accurate accounting. As for the selection of music, give me anything from 1964 to 1971. So my question here is, who is unreasonable in this situation? Neighbor A that doesn't like the selection of music neighbor B is listening to, or neighbor B for liking a certain genre of music but not violating the dBA? So when you open the door to allow individuals that have 0 criteria to be able to determine another human's behavior as unreasonable, you open the door to endless complaints wasting town resources. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Oh, she did.
No, Bailey, I agreed with you on the unreasonable thing at the last meeting, and I don't know if you've seen the latest revision, but I think we've addressed that.
So when I read the new revision, and you guys can correct me, there's like new wording to it, but it doesn't take out someone being able to determine something unreasonable.
Okay, I'll defer to Ashley in a second, but my understanding of it is she struck out all of the leaving it up to a person's opinion, and it now says any sound that exceeds the noise thresholds of this chapter shall be considered unreasonable. So it's not left up to a guy who likes 1964 music. It has to meet these written things.
Okay.
So Ashley, if you could chime in or.
Right, so that was an additive sentence. It says, any sound that exceeds the noise thresholds of this chapter shall be considered unreasonable noise. But there is some discretion afforded to the enforcement officer responding, so,
Okay,
during
I thought
after
that was
hours.
struck out. I apologize. Okay.
Right, and I mean, I'm not opposed to a noise ordinance, it's a great thing, but if you have one neighbor that, you know, doesn't like your wind chime, and in the packet that I handed to you guys, there's a
But
complaint.
it wouldn't be if your neighbor doesn't like the wind chime, it's if the Putnam County Sheriff shows up and says, at me, as a reasonable person enforcing the law, is this wind chime exceeding the noise code?
So how many times can a neighbor call Putnam County Sheriff's Department and waste those resources saying, this is annoying me, but it's a wind chime, or it's a turkey that we're legally allowed to have? So that my only request is that the wording unreasonable be changed, but add, you know, whatever it is that you're adding without that unreasonable added to it, or make an exception for farm animals, because that's our biggest thing. I mean, we are allowed to legally have our poultry and our horses, and then we're being told that, you know, if our turkey gobbles, we can be fined, which,
I don't think anybody's actually said that. If a turkey gobbles, you know, in your legally owned turkey gobbles in the middle of your yard and it's kept with the appropriate distances, I think a reasonable person would say, okay, that's the noise a turkey makes.
a reasonable, so there was questions that I had asked, and I'm pretty sure one of them was answered that, yes, the turkey and animals would be subjected to violation if one finds it unreasonable. I think it was the responses from Tony Hay earlier in like one of our first meetings here.
And forgive me, if a turkey gobbled louder than
And that's the thing.
75 decibels?
Yes, if a turkey gobbled louder than 75
not.
decibels,
Okay.
well, so then it's not a problem.
Unless you have an unreasonable neighbor that constantly.
What turkey gobbles at 75 decibels?
No, they don't, but that's the thing, but
Exactly. So
according
then
to
it's
the
not a problem.
unreasonable, it doesn't have to meet the 75 or the 65, as long as someone thinks it's unreasonable.
I think it would be like other violations that get escalated to a point where there's a determination of whether or not that really was unreasonable by another third party or something. Is that accurate to say?
Right, it's not just that your neighbor is saying that it's an unreasonable noise, it's that the responding officer, whether it be the Putnam County Sheriff's Department or the code enforcement officer, and if it's the code enforcement officer, they're going to be using the noise meter and checking it against the decibels that are in the code. If it's the Putnam County Sheriff's Department, they're going to use the reasonable determination. And there are criteria within the proposed code for what is unreasonable. So it's not just this, you know, off the cuff, I think that's loud because I don't like that type of music.
And I would just add, Ms. Santucci, your FOIL asked for communication between town board members about the noise ordinance, and within that, I think there was 3 complaints, but, you know, as this gentleman, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, pointed out, he's made numerous complaints, you know, we weren't aware of those, so I just don't want to mischaracterize. I think there's a lot of complaints about noise. I got one yesterday, nowhere near your property at all, that don't necessarily go to the board, but that do go to the building department. I do think it's a bigger issue than the 3 that you've laid out here.
Right, well, I had requested anything within the last 5 years, not just within the board members. It
Right,
was-
and I'd just add to that, as the Director of Communications for the county, that most of the noise complaints are through 911 and not through the building department. Because initially, people are gonna be annoyed, they're gonna use their cell phone to call the police, and 911's gonna handle that, or the sheriff's department on their direct number.
Okay, so back to my request to add an exemption for farm animals. You know, in one of our last meetings, a business came out and said, hey, can you change the wording to allow golf maintenance equipment to be added? And it was done so effortlessly. So is there a reason why you guys would be opposed to adding an exception for farm animals, since we're allowed to have them in other parts of the code?
Can I ask a different question, Ashley?
Yeah.
Back to the unreasonable portion, would it be helpful to clarify who makes the unreasonable determination? So that whether it's a resident or a Santucci reading it, thinking that it's their neighbor or they have the right to make that unreasonable determination. And I think
Yes,
if
I
that was
can-
clearer, I think that addresses your farm animal thing as well, because a reasonable sheriff isn't gonna violate you for a turkey
Well, if you had
gobbling.
agricultural status from New York State, I can have 1,000 poultry on my property at that point. So is that still fall under the town code for noise if you have the agricultural farm status from New York State?
So I took into consideration your poultry exemption, and I talked to some people in town, some that lives close to me, not anyone that lives close to you. And again, I've never heard your turkey. I think I stated at the last meeting, I've never been in the wild and heard a turkey gobble. I don't know why. But this person talked to me about guinea hens, and they started playing guinea hen noises for me. And it was extremely loud and very annoying. And again, I've never heard your turkey
can
or
agree to that.
any poultry, but if I, to whoever spoke earlier, if I had to hear that all day, every day, it would be
I
annoying.
believe guinea hens don't fall under poultry.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would never want guinea hens either. They're obnoxious, but I don't believe they fall under poultry. They're more of like a game bird.
I almost feel like we're picking a solution in search of a problem, and I know you have a concern about what this will do, and as Mr. Wallach said earlier, and I think we would agree to, is that this is always a living document, right? So we do have some issues in town that we're trying to resolve, and if other issues arise, we could always revisit them. That would be my opinion anyway.
Okay.
I think the other thing I would point you to is the section E, the plainly audible, unreasonable noise prohibited. That's the section that the responding officer would be looking at for
Okay.
enforcement. And it says when they're making this determination, they have to look at the volume of the noise, the frequency of the noise, the periodicity of the noise, whether the noise is unusual or incongruous with the surrounding environment. So in your instance where you were talking about your farm animals that are at your home, that noise would not be incongruous with your home because you have legally farm animals.
Right, so that brings me back to, I had asked a question, what is too frequent? Or you had answered that with the frequency is like the volume, it's the measuring of the noise. But then, so periodically, so how often is too often for periodically? Like if a turkey's gobbling 5 times a day, is that too much? Is that too periodic?
That's the natural gobbling duration of a turkey, then it would be normal.
Okay, all right, I still just would love to see an exception in here for farm animals. I mean, this is Putnam County. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment? Well, one person, and you can come up after that.
Dennis Santucci, 5 Shady Lane. On the unreasonable part, I think Eric's onto something there. If you have a portion that says that the sheriff's department or the building department are the only people who can give a violation, well, that would be a little more reasonable, because if you look at that last page of the flyer that my daughter gave you, the neighbor was complaining about a wind chime. I mean, the way the wording is in this law, this change here, you can have children playing in the swimming pool. The Boy Scouts come every Tuesday from 2 to 5, and the neighbor thinks it's unreasonable, makes the complaint down at the courthouse here on his own without the building department or the sheriff's department. Now the person that has the swimming pool has to come to the judge and explain why is it not unreasonable or is unreasonable, and the judge is going to have to make a determination. You can really overwhelm the court system with this wording, the way you have it right now. So I think it has to be at least something that explains that the sheriff department or the building department is the only one that could actually determine the violation.
That's all it does now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I mean,
not really.
no one can just come here, lodge a complaint, and then you're in court.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
The way this is written, you can make a complaint, you can come here and make an
Someone has to go to
affidavit.
the scene to verify the complaint. There's no lack of oversight on that part.
Complaints
Whether
come
it's
from-
the state
Actually,
police,
can
the
you
sheriff,
clarify what I'm
the
saying?
Rooster, whoever it is.
Is it true that you can make a complaint to the courthouse right here on your own without going to the building department or the sheriff? And then there could be a complaint filed and the homeowner is gonna have to represent himself
No.
in front of a judge?
No.
That's
No.
not due process.
Okay.
Typically, the complaints either go through 911 or the complaints come to the building department.
Right, but even though the unreasonable portion should be regulated by the sheriff's department or the building department, period.
That's the intent of the code, and we will make that more clear.
Thank you.
Any further Peter?
I had a few after.
My name is Peter Scott. I own the Farm to Market subdivision on Farm to Market Road. It's across from the school, the high school, and we found that during the fall, when we built out all the lots, we're ready to start building houses there, we were getting excessive noise from the school. And my question is, we have remote monitoring, noise monitoring equipment in our office, and we could provide documentation utilizing this equipment, which would paraphrase or summarize in graphical form noise emanating from a property. In our case, it would be from the school. Is that admissible to the building department under professional engineering license to record and to provide documentation of excessive noise events?
I mean, the school district isn't necessarily subject to the town's noise ordinance.
Are you proposing a solution to some of the people in the meeting, or are you asking if you can have the school be quieter?
Well, what I'm asking for is, because in our office, we can provide remote monitoring of any facility, any location. And so we were prepared to put something together on the school. I know it's exempt, but
Right.
basically we're working on that now in a separate presentation. And we're saying in the future, if a noise event is taking place, as professional engineers per your ordinance, can we provide documentation in lieu of like calling the sheriff's department or calling the building department? Can we just provide a documentation of the excessive noise through appropriate equipment and enter that into this ordinance as a complaint?
If you, for lack of a better word, if you want to be deputized as a town code enforcement officer, possibly, but I don't think you could do it on your own.
No, we want to do that.
Well,
I guess what it's almost like a commercial for you, but I guess what you're saying is you could be hired to do noise measuring to submit as backup. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That's what I
Does
got.
the ordinance allow
This is like
that?
a
Because
free
what's happening is, we're getting, I know from what we're working on with the school, we're getting cyclic events which basically are excessively loud, but you can never get the person there at the time the event takes place.
hey, when Brewster High School scores a touchdown, people want to cheer.
Oh, this is not, it's loud music coming out of loudspeakers on the side of the
Oh,
building.
loudspeakers, different story, yes. And I think didn't they respond to that? They were working on it?
This is the first I've heard of it.
Okay.
But,
Yeah, I think that's a Will question. I wouldn't think that would be, if it ever made it to court, I don't think that would stand.
No.
you'd have to get
You should-
a building inspector then or
Accompany
a
it.
sheriff's department to monitor it.
Yeah. You can accompany them. I mean, if you have the equipment, it's happening, you get a hold of the sheriff's department, and you be there and you show them that it'd be very helpful to the sheriff's department and us.
Right, okay.
But I don't think you could turn it in on your own and say, here, just like someone passing a double line, you got a camera in your car. Well, they can't give them a ticket, they didn't witness it.
Okay. Very good. That's what I needed. Thank you.
We're all lawyer wannabes.
Well, we're working on it. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public? Oh.
Hi, Alicia Russo. I just have a question for clarity, because I totally get why a school would be exempt, but I kind of missed half the conversation. So the amplifiers were an issue? I get why the school would be exempt from noise,
Yeah.
but the amplifiers, it said, were an issue?
For which, the last comment?
This last conversation, I didn't hear at all.
I think what Mr. Scott was saying is that he has equipment that he can measure noise with.
Oh, I wasn't worried about that. I was more about the if those amplifiers, I mean, I get for a football game, yay, no problem. But if we're talking after the hours of 8 o'clock and there was still the amplifiers going on and they
Yeah.
were long, separate of a school, because I understand why that may be exempt, that would be an issue?
Yes.
Okay, and I am not complaining, I love Tilly Foster, because where I live, I can hear them, so it's great getting a free concert. But just to understand that if someone else in the area had an issue, is that on a permit, are they exempt?
They're exempt.
They're also.
They're
exempt.
also
They're
exempt
also,
because it's
so
county property.
where is the information on who's exempt and why?
Well, everyone's basically required to, but something like the school in Putnam County with its own,
Oh, so like,
Government.
but a private facility?
private facility.
Right, okay, so if, like, there's a private baseball field next to me, they would be subject to?
No, they would be subject to the rules. Yes.
Right, okay, just from a law, from what you've outlined here, after 8 o'clock and so on and so forth?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, perfect, just need a clarification, thank you.
Thank you.
I had a few, actually, unless there's anyone else from the public, I had a few things I wanted to add. If the board would entertain it. For the last paragraph, so page 9, section C, it says each property is eligible for a noise permit. I think we should maybe change that, just because it is such an issue, to you can only apply for one permit per calendar year, because that sort of
Wait, what page what?
guarantees it. Page 9, section C.
Section C.
So it says each property is eligible for one noise permit per year. I don't know, I just got caught up on the eligible. If it's a permitting process, I would think you would apply. So it should be, you could only apply for one permit.
What if you got 2 kids?
Well, I think what Eric's saying is that this reads like
You're guaranteed.
you're
it.
entitled to get one.
Yeah,
Well-
Where you might not be.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't meet the other things.
that would be my suggestion. Again, it's a living document, so we could change it if that became too restrictive. And I'm just putting this out for the public comment so we can discuss it. And then it says not to exceed 3 days. You know, luckily where I am, it's very quiet. But like this gentleman mentioned, that I don't know if I'd want a raging party going on next to my home for 3 days. So I would maybe make that 1 day. And then the other thing was, Ashley, are there any, what is the penalty? Like, are there fines associated with this? Like, if it is a business that's making noise, could it just become the cost of doing business and they continue to do it? Or how do we prevent it from becoming repetitive?
There are fines, just. go to
I
that.
looked up our fee schedule and I didn't see it
It's,
in there.
give me a sec. It's under section 96-10, penalties for offenses. Any person who shall violate any provision of this chapter shall be guilty of an offense, and upon conviction thereof be subject to a fine of not more than $250, or by imprisonment not exceeding 15 days, or both such fine and imprisonment.
Okay, that's the first offense. What if there's a second, third? Can it be upgraded each time?
Escalated?
I would defer to Will on how that gets handled with the courts. That's the standard language that's in almost every chapter of the code for violations.
Yeah, you get what I'm saying. If it's a business and that becomes the cost of doing business, every weekend they pay $250 and they, have raging whatever. So I can ask Will that.
Typically, how it works is because it's a violation. It's neither a misdemeanor or felony. So as it is a violation, continued violations, it is the cost of doing business. But at a certain point, then it becomes disorderly conduct. At another point, it can get into Class B misdemeanor territory.
Okay, that's helpful. And that concludes my comments, yes.
Anyone else on our end? Anyone else for the public? I'll make a motion to close the public hearing and keep it open for 10 days for public comment through writing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, nothing on the work session this evening. And waiving the rule reading of the correspondence.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
2, approval of the voucher list, $784,901.32. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Waive the reading of the budget transfers.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Setting of meeting dates and public hearings. All meeting dates will be at 1360 Route 22, Brewster, New York, at 7 p.m. unless otherwise noted. Thursday, April 7, 2022, and Thursday, April 21st, 2022. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 5. Resolve that AKRF Inc. is hereby engaged for the purpose of providing wetland consulting services to the town of Southeast, and Chris Robbins of AKRF shall be designated wetland inspector of the town of Southeast for a term commencing April 1, 2022, and ending March 30, 2023. Such appointment may be extended for an additional year at the town's option, and be further resolved that AKRF Inc. shall be compensated in accordance with the fee schedule set forth in the proposal to the town dated March 11, 2022, a copy of which is annexed to and made part of this resolution, and be further resolved that this resolution shall take effect upon the filing of any oath or undertaken by the wetlands inspector as may be required by law. So move for discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
1 no. Number 6.
Tony.
Tony's now.
Yeah. Next one, number 6. It's a IMA for emergency medical services. Now therefore it be resolved that if the Village of Brewster, the Village, and the Brewster Southeast Joint Fire District, the District, agree, the town supervisor on behalf of the town of Southeast be and hereby is authorized to enter in an intermunicipal agreement, the agreement with the Village of Brewster and the Brewster Southeast Joint Fire District as anticipated by the New York State General Municipal Law in form and substance approved by the town attorney. And be further resolved that such agreement shall contain the following terms and conditions. 1. The district shall provide basic emergency medical services, EMS, company bid specification to the town board and the village board. 2. The town board on behalf of the town and village shall engage in the bidding process required under general municipal law to solicit bids in accordance with the bid specifications. 3. Upon receipt of a bids acceptable to the town, village, and district, the town and village shall cooperate as necessary to enter into a joint contract with the EMS company upon such terms and conditions acceptable to them and the district. It being condition of the contract that EMS company should so contracted operate under the direction and control of the district. 4. The district shall fund the cost of the service by placing the contract sum with the town prior to or at the time of the signing of the contract, it being acknowledged by the parties hereto that all of the funding shall run through the town. 5. During the term of the contract for services, the district shall be available to report to each board as the status of the delivery of the services and any matter related to the contract. And be further resolved that this resolution shall be effective on the date the village and district adopt similar resolutions authorizing those respective municipal jurisdictions to enter such agreement. So move for discussion.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Number 7. First one on number 7, to amend the special permit and site plan approval for State Line Retail Center Restaurant Depot. And the resolve clause is way at the end on page 10 of the document. Now therefore it be resolved that pursuant to the authority vested in Town Board Chapter 138 zoning of the Town Code, the Town Board hereby grants special permit approval for the proposed project as defined above, subject to the following conditions identified below. For purposes of compliance, these conditions and any other conditions identified in the environmental review of the proposed project shall be enforceable by the Town of Southeast in accordance with the Town Code of the Town of Southeast. 1. Except as specifically modified herein, the proposed project shall be subject to all conditions of approval in the resolution of amended site plan, final site plan, special permit, and wetland permit approval for satellite, looks like satellite, State Line Retail Center Restaurant Depot dated June 18, 2020. So move for discussion.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Number 8, it's a resolution to adopt a special permit for State Line Retail Center, Brewster Subaru. And that takes place There, easy one. Now therefore be resolved that pursuant to the authority vested in the town board by chapter 130 zoning of the town code, the town board hereby grants a special permit for a motor vehicle dealership. So move for discussion.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor? Aye. Number 9, it's a motion to appoint Mary Matson, Dog Control Officer, term to expire 12/31/22. Courtney Pagano, our former Dog Control Officer, after 8 years, has chosen to retire. And this person's come well recommended and has quite a bit of experience. So, on the motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And supervisor's report. We're only a quarter of the way through the year so far. Things are pretty good, and if you saw court here today, you'd know why. I mean, it was really bad. Michelle, did you get the spot when you came back from lunch? I mean, they were parked up 22, and the line went past the end of the building. And it was like that for an hour, but the judges got them out really quick. So, things went well. So right now, it's a little bit too early to tell, but things are progressing well. Again, we have a good budget to work with, and every month we're coming in with the projections, and the court fees are higher than anticipated, but you can never tell. Because I had a couple of years when I was here, it was much lower. So take the good times while we can. Okay, public comment.
Evening, everyone. I'll be sure to tell the school that we need to keep things quiet. It's like my friends at the church. They're very busy on Sundays, but what are you going to do? The only thing new really going on is tonight, the Brewster High School's musical production of Footloose has started. It'll be tonight, Friday, Saturday at 7, and I think there's also a matinee at 2. And they actually got a shout out from Kevin Bacon, the original Footloose man, who most of these kids doing the play have no idea who he is. But they got a shout out anyway. Once again, we appreciate everything you guys do on our behalf. If there's anything we can do, please let us know. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott, would you be interested in that energy program?
We actually have an energy efficiency contract which is expiring, and we're also a part of an energy demand service at this time. So as the area's demand goes up, the schools cut back production to make up for it. But I'll be sure to mention it to Mr. Fryer.
Okay,
And,
yeah, I wonder, according to what he said, I wonder if maybe like all of the districts, all the buildings are on it or not, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's something, but I'm more interested, since we're also doing a facilities task force, and if there's any tie to solar power, I mean, if we're talking about building our infrastructure and fixing things up, and if that's a valuable thing, I just know in the past, solar power used to feed back into the grid. I don't know if that still is a concern, because I mean, if we have our buildings open a lot of times with nothing going on, we could definitely feed back in and it would benefit us. But I believe that was taken out a couple of years ago, but I'll be sure to bring it up to the board and to Mr. Fryer at the facilities and let him know. Thank
Has
you
the
for-
school ever looked into putting solar panels on the roofs? You have a lot of roof space. We have very little in the town itself, but you have quite a bit. Have they looked?
We
into
have a
it?
little bit of them.
Do you?
Years ago, I think the middle school did a renovation project. They put a green roof up on one of them, and there is some minor solar power. And I think there's geothermal. That's the heating source we use.
Right.
But it's definitely, I know White Plains and another other districts has a fair amount. Like they turn their whole parking lots into covered parking lots, and they put solar on it. So not only are the parking lots covered, they're also generating power. So, I mean, it's just a matter, I guess, of how pretty you want to make it. And I know you drive upstate, I mean, these little solar farms are everywhere. So I know a lot of the Rockland and the Orange schools are all directly feeding right into the solar powers because they have, you know, the size, but it's definitely something we should look into.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank
the
you.
county did a municipal project, it's called Article 9.
Yeah.
And they just put on the Smith campus, they did solar, so
Right.
something that you might want to look
Definitely, like I
into.
said, and then if anything, and we, all of us can team up, partner together, better efficiency, better rates, you know, better service for all of our taxpayers, so I don't see why we wouldn't. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Anyone else from the public? Town board? Okay, see none. Thank you all. Take a motion.
Motion to close the meeting?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming.